Hello, everybody, and welcome to another Top 10 edition of Magic Mike's, proudly sponsored by our Patreon supporters and CoolStuffInc.com. You can find cool stuff in stock every day, and check out our co-sponsor, Mana Traders, the best tool to enhance your Magic Online experience. Use the code MagicMikes for 12% off anything, or 12% off rather, off your next subscription with Mana Traders. My name is Evan Irwin. We get started each week by saying hello to my two co-hosts, MTG Nerd Girl.
Hey guys, welcome back. Or I should say, are you ready for Aftermath?
Right.
Ruben Bressler.
Aftermath is all about welcoming back.
Ayo. It's about picking up the pieces.
That's right.
Because so much has changed. So much. Everything's going to change now. Magic will never be the same.
I'm sad. I just started my Nissa costume. Now what am I going to do?
Yeah, it's all your fault.
Oh,
is basically
100%. You shouldn't have done that. We also give our choice of the top comment from the last Top X show in a segment we call Honorable Mention. Ruben will tell us who was the most eloquent, letting us know what card we did not choose as one of our top 10 March of the Machine limited cards. Ruben?
there were some interesting comments about people's takes on March of the Machines, but I really liked Malakarath or Malakorath or Malakarath. Whatever, you know who you are, who wrote, "I'm genuinely surprised that none of you mentioned the most powerful bear ever printed." That's quite a sentence.
Good, but
Kenra Spellspear, a creature that soloed my final game of a draft as my opponent never quite managed to race both prowess and ward, despite negating future threats. It's become the linchpin of my standard and pioneer decks, with no doubt that it can do the work in constructed.
Kenra Spellspear, I guess, aka Let Me Solo Her, the magic card. Yeah. It's a red and generic mana for a 2/2 uncommon Jackal Warrior with Trample and Prowess. Whenever you cast a non-creature spell, it gets +1/+1 till end of turn. And for 3 generic and a blue Phyrexian mana, you can transform it, flip it on over into Jitaxian Spellstalker. A Phyrexian Jackal with Trample, Ward of 2 generic mana, and Prowess. Each instance of Prowess triggers separately, so one single spell turns into a 5/5 Trampler, and just being a 3/3 Trampler that flips over on turn 3 is still very good. This card is very powerful and very scary, and I have lost to it multiple times.
Yeah. Flip cards are no joke.
Yeah. The ones, especially the ones that flip on turn 3. The other one that flips on turn 3 is the black-green one that poops out an insect when it dies.
And the blue one
flips.
The blue one does too. It flips over into the 3/3 that whenever it's blocked, it gets
milestone. But I'm saying that those two are the ones that you cast on turn 2, flip them on turn 3.
Yes.
They're both extremely scary, very difficult to deal with. This card punches well above its weight class. It's able to fight as a 5/5 on demand effectively. Coming in hot has been ruining me with this card. Having a 6 power first striker that kills everything that could possibly ever tangle with it. Yeah, that tramples. Very scary card, even at just common.
Yeah, and it's a fantastic choice. Malakorath, pick your flavor. Contact us on DMs, on Twitter at MagicMikesCast for your prize. Thanks again to CoolStuffInc.com for sponsoring this giveaway. And stay tuned for our top 5 list this week. Maybe you can win next week's or next time's free gift certificate. Because small set, truncated Top X to go through. Though, Nerd Girl, you had mentioned that you did pick 10 just in case.
Yeah.
I did. Yeah, it was my suggestion to do top 5 because we had so few cards. And then I started doing it and I was just like, boop, 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 and just cranked out 10 cards because there are some really sweet cards in here. I was like, ooh, this would be fun to build. Oh, this would be cool. And just kind of forgot. So yeah, top 5 today, but I definitely could have done 10.
There you go. Well, we do know that all the lists are unique, so we are going to get to talk about 15 total cards, which I'm good with in a 50 card set, which sounds like fun.
But if any of our top 5s overlap with your top 10, be sure to let us know.
Which would be interesting, but now she has to keep track of the list.
Oh, also. Well, in that case, you don't have to.
It's fine.
Oh, you're fine. I'll just note it.
Just reference it. It's fine. Well, let's go ahead and get started here with our number 5. Oops, I have the wrong slide up because I have number 10 up. That's not right. Number 5. Ruben, what is your number 5?
We'll fix it in post. My number 5 is a card that has an interesting... It's not an interesting type line, I suppose. It's an interesting and unique qualifier, I guess. When you print an aura, you have to describe what the aura is enchanting. And this is our first ever enchant legendary creature with Leyline Immersion. Leyline Immersion is 3 generic and a green for an aura that enchants a legendary creature. The enchanted creature has Ward of 2 and tap, add 5 mana in any combination of colors. Spend this mana only to cast spells. Put this on the list for a couple of reasons. One, this is going into the detail of what makes Aftermath and one of the central tenets of Aftermath unique, which is that many, if not most, of the Planeswalkers, their abilities have shifted and changed. And many of them are not Planeswalkers anymore, but they still are powerful mages, people with abilities. They're still, X-Men mutants in some way, shape, or form. And this one showcases that Nissa was able to discover that Zhalfir, which is Teferi's homeland, and was cut off from the rest of Dominaria for such a long time. When Zhalfir returned, it reemerged as its own plane, not as part of Dominaria anymore. So Zhalfir is its own plane that Magic could go to in the future, which I think is super interesting. Also, the ability to add 5 mana in any combination of colors to cast spells is not a joke. This could theoretically be ramp. So maybe you go from 3 to 5 basically with this card, turn it into a mini Gigantha. But also if you untap with this card, you're just going absolutely nuts with any number of things like Atraxa or any of the Niv Mizzets that put a bunch of cards into your hand. Leyline Immersion certainly could have combo potential.
This is interesting. This is one of the few cards I read when I was like, oh, this is interesting. But I personally didn't think that it made the cut even for a top 10. So I'm surprised to see it on your top 5. I think it's fine. The fact that it goes onto a creature just makes you, makes it far more vulnerable to being removed and just being bricked on the card. So this, to me, doesn't really seem like something I want to be doing in Constructed, but it is definitely interesting to hear your take on it. I think it's pretty cool. I hope it sees play.
Yeah, this is a weird bird. Enchant legendary creature has never been put on a Magic card before. That blows my mind. 12 years or something now of Commander sets and Commander releases and Commander Legends and all this other crap, and they've never said enchant legendary creature. That's kind of amazing. To me, there's clearly some weird interaction that we're not thinking of off the top of our head, which says spend this mana only to cast spells because something probably untaps itself or something weird. This sounds like a Commander All-Star. You don't want to have something like this in Constructed because the creature's just going to die in response most of the time. But in Commander, you're going to get to do all the fun, silly stuff, and that's what this card's made for.
I'm pretty sure this goes infinite with Mind Games. I have to make sure that Mind Games untaps a card.
Mind Games untaps a card?
Let me look it up. Yep. Oh, no, it only taps it. Never mind. Mind Games is a buyback tapper. I thought it also untapped, so never mind.
Gotcha.
Ignore me.
Still a really cool, interesting aura. All right, let's move to number 5 for Nerd Girl. What you got?
So my number 5, if you guys have seen my Commander show or just played any amount of Magic with me or on my stream, I love black and I love Orzhov. So the only thing I want to be doing most of the time is draining or tutoring things. And who does that better than Ayara's Oathsworn? We have a 2/2 bear for a colorless and a black. You get a human knight with menace. When it deals combat damage to a player, if it has fewer than 4 counters on it, put a +1/+1 counter on it. If it has exactly 4 counters, instead you get to search your library for a card, put it into your hand, then shuffle. You don't have to reveal, you don't have to do anything. You get to just tutor. And if you have to connect 4 times with this creature for that to start tutoring, but it gets to tutor multiple times. And that's not to say you can't put +1/+1 counters on it with other things. And there certainly are sacrifice things that help you put counters onto other cards and to just make this thing work. It's pretty cool.
I always like black being aggressive, like mono black aggro type stuff, because those decks are always super duper fun, and they're different. It's not mono red, it's not mono green ramping or whatever. It's like black. It has tools to kill things and things to manipulate your deck and draw cards. And this is a really weird way of just making something that gets like scarier and scarier to the point where it gets super scary and then tutors a card. Like that's payoff. That's good stuff.
It also enables itself with menace, which like makes it difficult for you to prevent them from doing the thing that it wants to do, which I love.
Yeah, it's its own little package. I mean, you can support it. This is designed to make backup, I think, see some constructed play. Obviously, this is a huge candidate to put a +1/+1 counter on it with your backup cards. Having menace already makes it a good target, much less if you make it a 6/6, it's going to start diabolic tutoring every turn. But also being a 2/2 knight for 2 that has a good offensive ability is good enough. And as it grows, it's just even scarier for the rest of the game. So definitely one of the cards that I think is going to have an immediate impact in standard.
And Double Strike will give it 2 +1/+1 counters for every time it hits them. Which is also pretty cool. It doesn't say once per turn or something weird, which is nice. All right, let's move on here to my number 5. This is a cool card that I like, and it's a bit expensive. I think it's one of the more expensive cards in the set. It's also one of the cards that, it both sparks, I want to brew, and then I'm curious where it's going to go. Because again, for me, I don't want all these cards to just be like commander cards. I want to put them in constructed decks, and I want to see what you can do in constructed with Tyvar the Bellicose. He's a green, a black, 2 generic mana for a 5/4. So those are good stats. Those is a wonderful rate for what you're getting. And it says whenever one or more elves you control, it is a legendary elf warrior. Whenever one or more elves you control attack, they gain death touch until end of turn. Each creature you control that has, quote, each creature you control has, quote, whenever a mana ability of this creature resolves, put a number of +1/+1 counters on it equal to the amount of mana this creature produced. This ability triggers only once each turn. There are payoffs, y'all, in an elf deck. I mean, like Archdruid, Elvish Archdruid, and whatnot, like just sound insane. So part of me is like, is this some Timmy fantasy magical Christmas land? Or could you actually get there with a bunch of elves thanks to that really sweet ability?
Yay, elves. When elves are good, I'm happy.
I don't think you need to try to combo with Tyvar. You just need a Llanowar Elf. Like, if you have Llanowar Elf in play, it becomes a 2/2 and then attacks as a 2/2 Death Toucher. That's fine. That's fine without comboing. Like, this is just a good payoff card at a top end of a mid-range elf deck that grows all of your, your O2s that tap for a generic mana into things that can fight later in the game. I think that this is a really interesting design. 5/4 is a huge amount of stats for a 4 power or for a 4 mana creature. So very cool card.
All right.
Yep.
Let's move on here to number 4. Ruben, what's your number 4?
My number 4 is certainly going to see constructed play. I mean, if it doesn't, then why did they put COPPERCOAT Vanguard in the set? I don't, this card is everything you want in an aggressive humans deck to support what you've got going on already. COPPERCOAT Vanguard's a 2/2 for a generic and white for a human soldier. Each other human you control gets +1/+0 and has Ward 1. That Ward 1, I mean, 1 extra mana. If you've ever played against a Thalia, you know what I'm talking about. If you've ever played against a Curse Catcher, I mean, nobody likes to get rune boggled. You got a COPPERCOAT Vanguard putting attacks on every target. This card's very, very good.
Yeah, this card, and we spoke a little bit about on the live show where I'm just like, Wizards is just giving less of a crap about Lords. You know what I mean? In terms of them being rare or mythic rare only. You can have Uncommon Lord. It doesn't pump their toughness. It's all right. It still does cool stuff. It adds things. It adds abilities. It's neat. It's rad. It gives you another thing to put in your humans decks. Can it make more humans decks more powerful? I don't know. I mean, humans is pretty high powered as it is in constructed formats. But again, all the casual decks need more human lords, and I'll take it.
Yeah, I mean, I think that the thing is now is that decks are full, right? Like, they have good cards. They have lots of them now. So printing more of them isn't necessarily making making the cut in decks, and it's just giving people who are playing Commander, because people love themed Commander decks,
Right.
more options, which I think is wonderful.
Yeah, and this is
But
uncommon,
what if
so
we
it's
made
affordable.
Standard a year longer? Do you think that would
I
help
think that would really push
make
it in
the
there.
decks less full?
Yeah.
Well, I was talking more about Eternal formats. Yeah, standard is yeah, there's
Look,
a lot
this
going
one,
on there.
if you have not seen the booster fun version of Coppercoat Vanguard, check that out. It's got serious anime vibes, giant sword
Ooh.
coming right at you. Looks amazing.
It does.
It might be my favorite variant of the entire set, honestly. It's really, really, really
It's
fun.
got like a lightsaber sword.
Oh, I know, and amazing. All right, let's go to number 4 from Nerd Girl. What you got?
All right. So this card is awesome. I love the character that we got in Capenna. I loved the artwork and everything about him. So we're going to talk about Obnixilis, the Captive Kingpin. For 2 colorless, black and a red, you're going to get a 4/3 demon that has flying and trample. Whenever one or more opponents lose exactly 1 life, put a +1/+1 counter on Obnixilis Captive Kingpin. Exile the top card of your library until the end of your next end step. You may play that card. So this is card advantage each time you do 1 damage specifically, and there are so many small little things in these colors that want to be doing this. Sort of like the Kamigawa artifacts, right? You're constantly draining. You have cat ovens. You've got little devils that will do these sorts of ping mechanics. There's black life drain whenever you play a spell, gain or drain, extort, things like extort is loss of life, maybe? That might not work.
It might be about blood artist things and whatnot, yeah.
Yep, blood artist triggers would work. The human bastion would work, the little enchantment. Like, everything works with this, and it's going to give you so much card advantage, in addition to just being a really tough to deal with flying creature.
Yeah, another one of the most expensive cards in the set, and the booster fun version looks incredible. And this is another one I'm just like, I get the itch to brew when I read something like this, where you just know you already know there's options out there. You know of them, you understand them, they kind of think about it, and okay, cool, maybe there's an all will be one combo. If you can just ping them once, you can just ping them to death with all will be one, which is really neat. This is a card that, if it becomes a constructed card, I wouldn't be surprised, because damage plus card advantage, and colors that can do that exact small amount of damage that you want over and over again, I'll take it.
Yeah, there's a couple ways to get this to trigger the turn that you play it in constructed. Dreg Recycler comes to mind, which is a common central piece to the red-black sacrifice deck, but doesn't really see play in constructed, but would be really good at making this a 5/4 instead of a 4/3, which is kind of a crux point. And so, there's in addition, of course, you've got the 2-card combo, 2.1 card combo of Obnixilis, the Captive Kingpin, plus the card All Will Be One, which all you need for that is to attack with a devil.
And then the previous Obnixilis makes devils that ping for 1 damage. It kind of also is on the curve, and just 1 damage, making this a 5/4 flying trampler for 4 mana. That's a lot. That is a serious threat. And so serious threats need serious answers, and they made a really super duper cool, just kind of answer a lot of things and put it in just the right color that can really ramp up, if you will, into making lots of these effects that answer a lot of your problems. And that is the story of Tranquil Frillback. Tranquil Frillback is a green and 2 generic mana for a 3/3 rare dinosaur. When it enters the battlefield, you may pay green up to 3 times, and when you pay this cost 1 or more times, choose up to that many. The first is destroy target artifact or enchantment, the second is exile target player's graveyard, and the third is you gain 4 life. And there's a whole bunch of times when you play Magic the Gathering, when if you play 6 mana and you gain 4 life and you exile their graveyard and you disenchant something, that things turn around completely, because it fixes a lot of the problems that you're dealing with.
This is Titan of Industry at home is what this is. When we had Tappy Toe Claws on the show, she had to remind me that the Dimetrodon's not a dinosaur. Well, guess what, friends? Magic the Gathering says that this Frillback is a dinosaur. So there.
Shows you.
This was one of my ones that we didn't end up using. This was my number 6. I think this card is awesome. I like built-in creatures that can remove artifacts and enchantments. I think the kicker cost is fan-freaking-tastic. That's a lovely, lovely rate. And in a game of Commander, it's going to absolutely just poop on the rest of the table, and it's perfect.
Yeah, this is one of those where I'm like, was it too difficult to include kicker? Because these days they don't care so much about just kind of randomly including a keyword per se. So you can have this in the kicker deck and things that care about kicker. But maybe maybe it just didn't work on the card. Who knows? It's a super cool card though. I love it. Let's move on here to number 3. And Ruben, what's number 3?
My number 3, I think, is the card I'm actually most excited to brew with myself. One of the big problems with decks that have dragons in them and want to be casting dragons to win the game is often you're dead by the time the dragon gets cast, or your opponent has 6 untapped islands by the time you're ready to cast your dragon, and the game is locked up in one way or another by the time you get to do your cool thing. And what's even more frustrating is even if you are able to cast your big 5, 6, 7 mana dragon, sometimes you gotta wait a turn because summoning sickness exists and some of the dragons get a little sicky on the way down. But Sarkhan's Soul Aflame really helps mitigate both of those issues. Cost reduction, as well as getting to get the effect of whatever that dragon is that you cast the turn that you play it. Sarkhan's Soul Aflame is a generic, a blue and a red for a 2/4 legendary creature human shaman. Dragon spells you cast cost a generic less to cast. And whenever a dragon enters the battlefield under your control, you can have Sarkhan's Soul Aflame become a copy of it until the end of the turn, except that its name is Sarkhan's Soul Aflame, and it's legendary in addition to its other types. So you get the effect of a Goldspan dragon ×2, or you get the effect of your old Gnawbone. You get the effect of your ancient copper dragon, right? The turn you play it. And oh, by the way, all of those big giant idiots that cost 1 million mana are going to cost a little bit less.
I'm glad that it is 2 colors. Gets a little bit more punishing for anybody who just wants to run like mono red, or I know Rakdos dragons was kind of a thing for a minute as well. So this kind of like pushes a little bit more into the is it dragons, which we did see for a little bit in standard, but I don't think it's the thing we see a lot in like eternal formats. You tend to see it be a little bit more red, green, red, black, and I like pushing it deeper into blue.
I just want to see, like, I want Zurgo and Ojutai to be a thing. I want that to be a thing in standard that people are afraid of. It's really cool. You get it. Even if they can go for the throat it immediately, you still get that trigger, which is fantastic. They don't necessarily want to use the removal on a 2/4, but this 2/4 is also making all your stuff, easier to cast and faster to get down on the board, which is also great. So that's a great sort of tension point for that spell. And I think it's cool. I mean, I want Sarkhan to have some decent cards. Traditionally, Sarkhan's been like, meh. I'm trying to think of, was there like a great Sarkhan card at any point in time? Even the Sarkhan de Loco.
Sarkhan the Mad was
Sarkhan was a big part of like the Super Friends deck for a bit, where you Super Friends and then Sarkhan was your finisher and turned all of your controlling Super Friends into then flying beaters that killed them.
5 mana Sarkhan was the one good Sarkhan.
Yeah, the Dragon Speaker, I think it was.
Dragon Speaker.
Yeah. So yeah, I'm all about making cool Sarkhan cards. I'm okay with that. Nerd Girl, what's number 3?
All right, so my number 3 is a card that is kind of near and dear to my heart, at least in limited, certainly. This makes me wish I could build around it a little bit more in Constructed, because I liked this archetype a ton. And I would love to see it do well. And there is kind of an enchantments theme still going around. But now we've got Constellation back in the mix, which we didn't necessarily have before. So we're going to talk about CALIX Guided by Fate. Ooh. For a colorless green and a white. You get a legendary enchantment creature, human druid. He's a 2/2 with Constellation. When it or another enchantment enters the battlefield under your control, put a +1/+1 counter on target creature, so not just himself, so that's really nice. And whenever it or another enchant creature you control dies, deals combat damage to a player, you may create a token that's a copy of a non-legendary enchantment you control, and do this only once per turn. That is some scary text. Getting to make token copies of any non-legendary enchantment. So it's like anything that like ETBs and draws you cards, it's going to let you do so much stuff. And those copies are also going to activate him again because you're getting enchantments at ETB. So again, it's this sort of card that helps generate its own value.
Yeah, I mean, you have like the green-white enchantment deck already exists. Green Generous Visitor, into Jukai Naturalist, into Catilda, into Hallowed Haunting, like all of those things there. And this is also an enchantment, so it also helps with all of that stuff. So this is actually one of the cards I do think is going to supercharge an existing archetype, which I think is great, and I'm very excited about it. And one of the cards you can just really just slot in and just kind of see how it goes. Play your Spirit Companions, get your ossification. You're able to make new ossifications. That's
the
nuts.
big thing.
That's
I think
nuts.
Like you're able to clear the way to get CALIX through, and then once CALIX is through, you get to keep clearing the way.
Mm-hmm.
Like ossifications, seals from existence,
Borrowed Time.
Any banishing light effect with CALIX is insane.
Right. Teachings of the Kieran. I mean, you can get really silly with it. The restoration of Iganjo, for example, like there's a whole bunch of ways you can do really crazy stuff.
Leylight Binding was the popular hot one from
yes,
there.
Leyline Binding
go.
For sure.
Let's go. I love it. This card definitely seems scary. And I think a lot of people really just seem to dismiss it. And I'm like, just the ossification alone interactions would be really scary. Like, that's amazing. So yes, I love this card a lot, and it seems really cool. Speaking of cards that we love a lot and it's really cool, and the card we've spoken about on the cast a little bit before, but that's okay because it's still one of my top 5 cards of the set, and it's still amazing. And I will take anything that sticks it in and breaks it off when it comes to a red deck, because that's what Metropolis Reformer does. Metropolis Reformer is a white and 2 generic mana for a 2/3 rare Angel Cleric with flying and vigilance, and you have hexproof, and whenever it is dealt damage, you gain that much life, and so it sits there and it just wants you to bolt it. Please stoke the flames it, let me gain 4, hit it and then play with fire and let me gain some more life. Do whatever you got to do, but just punish the red deck, because man, when you play best of 1 Qs and Arena, you see a lot of red. And I love anything that says, stop that. Stop it.
But Evan, what about all the creature decks that are so prevalent in red? It doesn't do anything against creatures.
I mean,
it blocks
them. And then when it dealt, and you gain that much life.
I know, Evan. This was your argument when I was super high on this card.
Yeah.
Fine.
And you pooped all over my parade.
I don't know if I pooped. I was more like questioning. It was a question poop. It was like a...
Evan has come to the realization that you were right the whole time.
You were 100% right.
Sorry.
I was 100% wrong. And I was incorrect. And you were right. So, card's great. And I love it.
Yeah, I mean, Angel Cleric, both are relevant creature types for historic and modern. Mm-hmm. Flying Vigilance, you have hexproof. All of those are very relevant for staying alive, basically. And the fact that you have to use one of your targeted burn spells to be able to get rid of it is a huge deal, especially against the red deck, which, traditionally it tries to start out by killing you with small creatures that have haste, but typically run on the ground, and then tries to finish you off with burn spells up to the dome. This one not only prevents that, but also can stand in front of a dragon that comes your way if it really needs to. I think that gaining a bunch of life in combat is much more likely, where you're preventing them from bolting you upstairs before combat, but you're also standing in front of their 6/6 and gaining 6 life. So Metropolis Reformer does a whole lot.
Yeah, so the best case against this card for like modern is like my Searing Blaze. I always get the 2 confused. There's one that has landfall, deal 3 damage, and if it kills a creature, go upstairs for 3, which that makes that card way suckier because you're essentially just mitigating that damage that goes upstairs.
Yep.
I think it's Searing Blaze.
Searing Blaze was from Worldwake, and that dealt, if landfall, it deals 1 and deals 1 of the creature.
Yep. And then
player and
landfall's
creature,
3 and 3.
and landfall's 3 and 3.
But it does need to be a legal target before you even cast it, so they can't even Searing Blaze this. You'd have to target yourself and target the creature.
Fair. So my biggest concern is not that it takes a card out of your hand as a burn player. I am concerned that, when I play modern, I need to hand my opponent 7.5 cards. When I can do that, I win the game. This essentially mitigates 2 cards. And getting to 7.5 is already a struggle as it is. Now I need to get to 9.5 because the angel eats one, and then they also gain minimum of 3 life from me bolting this thing, which is also undoing the damage I've already done, mitigating another card at least. This is absolutely backbreaking. I'm scared of it. I hope nobody puts it in their sideboard.
Like, this to me is a lot of the future of what they do with creatures, is that they are huge impediments / they prolong the game just a little bit, but they also let them continue to make really good spells and or creatures, because now you got to deal 24 damage, now you got to deal 23 damage or whatever to get through, and I'm okay with that. Those are little subtle things I think they've been doing over the years. All right, cool. So let's move on here to number 2. Ruben, what's number 2?
You know what card's real good with Metropolis Reformer, and also Calix for that matter, is Cosmic Rebirth.
Oh yeah.
Cosmic Rebirth doesn't need any help per se, but boy, if I Cosmic Rebirth my Metropolis Reformer against a red deck, that's game. That's game, boys. Also, if you manage to get rid of your Calix and I get it back with Cosmic Rebirth, well, that's just good, clean living. I get to trigger Constellation again. Cosmic Rebirth is a generic, a green and a white for an instant that says choose target permanent card in your graveyard. If it has mana value 3 or less, you may put it onto the battlefield. If you don't put it onto the battlefield, you may put it into your hand. You gain 3 life. Instant speed.
Instant.
We're putting this onto the battlefield. So not only are we getting our Metropolis Reformer back, we're countering a burn spell in the process. Or countering a discard spell in the process. Or we're end of turn getting back Calix. Or we're mid-combat getting back something that has 5 toughness to eat your bad guy. And all for the low cost of 3 mana. And we get 3 life on top of it. This card's spectacular.
That is a lot of ands.
I mean, look, Wizards has done this thing where they'll find these weird little like mechanics / things that happen, and they start to go, maybe we should just make it better. And the first time they did this was with copying spells. Fork, for God's sake, was banned at one point because they're so afraid of it. And later they're like, okay, we'll let you have Fork. And then later they made it in blue. And then later they made like Galvanic Iteration. And now you got the one, the C double, I think it was, that you can just make copies of everything all the time, but you can't copy it because copy, whatever. Well, now they're doing it with like regrowth effects. Regrowth, as long, you don't even have to reclaim. It doesn't say like put it at the top of your library. No, you get it back to your hand at worst, which is just amazing. As long as it's a permanent. If it's a permanent, it's a planeswalker, it's a creature, it's an artifact, whatever. And so that keeps it in the realm of not being stupid or abused. And so they're just like, whatever, let's just make the best instant speed regrowth / rebirth / zombify for permanents, mana value 3 or less ever, and just put a gain 3 on top of it. Like, my God, this card is sick.
You just have to keep pushing the envelope to get more sales, because eventually, especially with Commander being one of the like highest dollar earning format for Wizards, right? At a certain point, there's only 100 cards in a deck, and if you keep printing the same quality, copy spell, they have the most copy spells they want in their deck. They can't put more in without diluting the spells that they're actually wanting to copy. So they have to keep making them a little bit better.
Just a smidge, we're on a very nice long incline. So this at 4 mana that brought a mana value 4 and gained 4 life would be another completely different spell we would talk about in different ways. So this card is dope. And again, just says like, how good can rebirth / zombify little tiny creatures, little tiny things be? I don't know. Nerd Girl, what's number 2?
All right. My number 2 is a sweet card because it sort of fixes the drawback of your deck. So Danitha, New Benalia's Light. For a colorless, a green and a white, you get a human knight 2/2 with Vigilance, Trample, and Lifelink. Right there, we're already pretty happy. You got 3 relevant keywords for 3 mana. Pretty fine. And then once during each of your turns, you may cast an aura spell or equipment spell from your graveyard. So this is sort of like a Luris for auras, which sort of mitigates the downside of auras that, you know, you get 2 for 1 if you get caught. And then you can cast this and get to do it over again. And then there's the idea that this is a legendary creature. It goes in the command zone. You know, they can't even permanently answer this and prevent you from doing it. So you get to put some really cool cards in your deck that you normally wouldn't be able to.
This card is dope.
Yeah.
This card, like, it's Lurrus, but with none of the restrictions whatsoever. It's just play any of them. Just whatever.
Yeah.
Go nuts.
And I mean, and also, you know, even if you're just targeting your own creatures with auras, very cool. But if you target your opponent's creatures with pacifisms, right? Like if your opponent manages to get rid of the prison term that you cast in your commander deck, then guess what? You could just get it back with Danitha.
Yeah, I mean, they just had, what was it called? Realm Breakers something, wasn't it? Was the new...
Realm Breakers Grasp.
Yeah, Realm Breakers Grasp. That card is just like one of the sickest pacifisms ever. Let's just go ahead and throw that in there.
Yep.
And again, any equipment, I'm trying to think if there's an equipment that sacrifices itself or something, or if there's things that do need to sacrifice artifacts.
Yeah, I mean, there's stuff like Blazing Torch.
Yeah. Old school
you know,
stuff.
There's like some living weapon ones, right? I think
Yes.
you usually sack the germ, but I think there are the shuriken, right?
Yeah, Ninja
That's a
Shuriken.
thing?
Yeah, the Shuriken, yeah.
And there's
So-
also the reconfigure equipment, which are creatures themselves, which
Ooh.
would just get recast here. So you get to
Yeah.
play a rabbit battery every turn if you really wanted to.
Right, or sack something as additional cost and just replay it, because why not? Dan, and again, 3 freaking keywords on top of all of that super cool rebuy. I'll take it. Yes, please. Some really cool 3-mana cards. And speaking of 3-mana cards, speaking of cards I've already crafted on Arena, because I desperately want to build a really fun, cool, interesting deck with Nissa, Resurgent Animist. She's a green and 2 generic mana for a mythic legendary elf scout. She's a 3/3 with landfall. Whenever a land enters the battlefield under your control, you add 1 mana of any color. So we're already Lotus Cobra. Got it. Then, if this is the second time this ability has resolved this turn, reveal cards from the top of your library until you reveal an elf or an elemental card. Put that card into your hand and the rest on the bottom of your library in a random order. You know, maybe this is a thing that you would want with fetch lands that get you the elementals in Modern, right? That's kind of cool and rad and super powered. We don't have that type of stuff. But, you know, we do have River Tears Overlook. You know, we've got those courtyard type cards that automatically trigger twice for the landfall, which is kind of cool. I noticed that Glissa, either 3-mana or 5-mana version, you know, that's an elf, which is cool. This is the stuff I've just been playing around with. And Titan of Industry as an elemental, for example, so it can help you find that as well. And of course, she herself is an elf, so she can find other copies of herself, which is kind of neat. But again, I don't know, this is one that has so much possibility that it makes me excited.
Yeah.
I like her. I'm very excited to see Nissa still being featured here, even though she's no longer a planeswalker. I hope that continues. I hope they find a way to get their spark back, slightly selfishly, because I'm just now working on my Nissa cosplay and I would like it to still be relevant.
She's still a legend. That's still relevant.
Yeah.
And the Omen Paths exist. So she's still going to go traveling along the Omen Paths with her partner, as we see in the art for Open the Way. You know, they are still able to move between the planes thanks to the World Tree. So the planes walking days may be over, but the walking the planes days aren't over.
Right. You got it. Well, either way, I'll take a cool sweet mythic that may do some stuff, and maybe it's just a really cool commander. I don't know.
Yeah. I mean, it says a lot of things that harken back to a lot of cool cards, right? Like it's got Omnath vibes, it's got Risen Reef vibes, it's a 3-mana 3/3. Like it does a lot of things that are really cool. It's got Lotus Cobra
vibes.
obviously going on,
which is super fun. All right, let's move on here to our number 1 card from March of the Machine Aftermath. Ruben, what you got?
My number 1 card, maybe I'm reading it through the lens of how dope this card is going to be in Commander and older formats, but it does seem very relevant in, I mean, almost every game of Magic that I've played. Filter Out would change the way that the game plays out in a very drastic way.
Hmm.
3 mana instant mono blue. So it's a generic blue for an instant. Return all non-creature, non-land permanents to their owner's hands. Obviously in Commander, this is significantly more relevant, where mana rocks and treasure tokens are much more prevalent. And getting rid of all of them, kind of an instant speed 3 mana board wipe for all of them, is a huge deal. But even in recent formats where I can get rid of incubator tokens, I can get rid of planeswalkers at end of turn, I can get rid of, pesky enchantments that are on my creatures, or pesky artifacts that are keeping me at bay, get rid of an ensnaring bridge or a pacifism, whatever is in my path, this doesn't target it. So I could get rid of a 9 lives if I really wanted to with Filter Out. There's a bunch of interesting corner cases with Filter Out. Instant speed, 3 mana. It says all, feels very, very, very good.
Yeah, big bounce effects like Cyclonic Rift and things like that are always going to be relevant, especially in Commander. And this does punish mana-intensive decks, especially green ones. I recently on our show had an episode where I was the only green player and a Cyclonic Rift was played, and everybody was like, oh, this kind of sucks. But they all went back to immediately having 6 land. I had 3, even though we were like 8 turns in, because I had 3 mana dorks, 3 mana rocks, and I was still cranking out cards, but then I was just like, oh, oops. And yeah, these are very, very punishing to those decks.
There is one saving grace to this card, and it is the fact that it is an uncommon. As of this recording, it's about $2 a pop for the regular version, of almost 15 for the booster fun. Look like a coin version, which looks really cool. And I'm guessing those are going to be way more expensive in the future. The fact that it's very simple, it's straightforward, but it's very powerful and affects every single player is honestly kind of rare. And again, the fact that it's not rare, it's not a mythic. Again, this is one of those things that you could be like, why is it rare? It's because they have to sell packs. It's like, it's uncommon. You should thank them because it could easily have been a rare, and I could totally have understood why, because it's a huge sweeping change just out of nowhere, which is really cool. Nerd Girl, what's number 1?
So my number 1 is a card that I think is really cool because it's just showing a little extra love to, creature types you don't see a lot. And also, I'm a really big fan of sea creatures. I did a lot of marine biology in school, and I always collect sea creature magic cards. So Kiora, Sovereign of the Deep, 3 colorless green and blue, is going to get you a Merfolk Noble. It's a 4/5 with Vigilance and Ward 3. Whenever you cast a Kraken, Leviathan, Octopus, Serpent, or Serpent spell from your hand, look at the top X cards of your library, where X is the spell's mana value. You may cast a spell with mana value less than X from among them without paying its mana cost. Put the rest on the bottom in a random order. Now, some, like Octopus or maybe Serpent, some of those are small, you're likely to whiff, but now we're talking about Leviathans and Krakens. Those are some big boys, and they've got some big booties, and they're quite expensive. You've got the green to ramp into them, and then you just sort of like cascade into some stuff. If you're playing a 6 mana Leviathan, you're gonna hit something derpy, and like that's gonna be very, very punishing.
I mean, Tolarian Terror exists.
Yeah.
Tolarian Terror for 1 mana lets you look at 7 cards and play anything 7 mana or less for free out of them.
If you have Kiora in play. Yeah.
If you have Kiora, of course. But again, that's good, clean living right there. That's what I want to follow up with.
And Tolarian Terror, that's the one that costs 1 less for each instant sorcery in your bin, right?
That's right.
So you could reasonably pay 1, 2, or 3 mana, play that, and then get another card after. That's very, very good. Kiora's, so first of all, I think that the reason why this is an Aftermath is because she now has the noble creature type, which I think is very cool. Ward 3 is a huge boon here. 4/5 is going to be able to tangle in combat, and allowing you to play your big derpy sea monsters with some additional value attached to it is very good.
Big derpy sea monsters.
Yay, derpy sea creatures!
I do wish, and this isn't on my list or whatever, just sort of thinking out loud, seeing a really cool legendary creature that's 4/5, I go, Sheldred. And I just wish there was something in here that was just like, screw Sheldred, like, just get out of here. There's nothing that was just like, that just targets that stupid card that's unbelievable. But that's cool. I love that card a lot too. So here for my number one, my last one. This was the number one card. I was like, my thoughts were, what is the card I expect to like cast the most just from utility alone? Which one do I expect to see in a whole bunch of deck lists? And we've talked about it a little bit before. And it is holding up what looks to be Elish Norn's head dress thing in Urborg Scavengers. Because Urborg Scavengers, granted, I thought this before they expanded standard a year, but whatever. Urborg Scavengers is a black and 2 generic mana for a 2/2 rare creature spirit, which sometimes matters, being a spirit. Whenever Urborg Scavengers enters the battlefield or attacks, exile target card from a graveyard, put a +1/+1 counter on Urborg Scavengers. Note, those are two separate things. You do not have to exile a card. Whenever you attack, it's getting bigger every time, no matter what. And it has flying as long as the card you exiled with it has flying. The same is true for first strike, double strike, Death Touch, Haste, Hexproof, Indestructible, Lifelink, Menace, Reach, Trample, and Vigilance. So this thing not only is just good at messing with graveyards, because graveyards are only getting better as a resource, I just think it's incredibly playable in what would have been, not occupied by a Cemetery Trespasser, right?
Yeah. Graveyard Trespasser.
Graveyard Trespasser, thank you.
Yeah, I mean, if you're missing Graveyard Trespasser, Urborg Scavengers is going to do a very good impression. The ward on the Scavengers, or the ward on the Trespassers, is backbreaking, whereas Scavengers is going to be easier to deal with. But the Soul Flayer-like effect of taking those abilities is pretty good. We are seeing some amount of Grixis and 5-color Reanimator strategies. So if you're able to ping an Atraxa out of an opponent's graveyard,
it gets 4 abilities.
It gets 4 abilities. If you're able to ping, even an Atali out of an opponent's graveyard, like, that's not a joke. So there's some.
Now,
good
is this
stuff.
till end of turn?
Mm-mm.
They just get those abilities.
They have them until it's gone. So
Okay.
exiling an Atraxa gets you flying, vigilance, death touch, lifelink. And again, when you play it, it's going to be a 3/3. You may not have to exile something if there's not a target, but it's going to be a 3/3 just to start off with. So let's go.
I love Scavenging Ooze in black.
Yeah.
Scavenging Ooze Plus.
Scavenging News ++. Yay.
Yes, and we had one of the preview cards that we had for Magic Mics back in the day was Death Gorge Scavengers, which was also a 3-mana kind of like value when it enters the battlefield and attacks, take something out of a graveyard card. This is better than that card, and that card saw standard play. So I think that there's plenty of room for Urborg Scavengers. Even and especially this derpy idiot. Look at this little dude who's so proud of what he found.
I mean, look at the special booster fun version. It looked incredible. Like
Aw.
the sort of the animated version
They look
almost.
like Miyazaki animals.
It's
They're
incredible.
so weird.
Look, on your bingo card has to be exiling Atraxa with Urborg Scavengers. It needs to be on there. You got to experience that in your life. I love it. All right. And that said, that wraps up our top 5 March of the Machine Aftermath cards. You'll see them on screen right now if you review. Take a look at my list, Nerd Girl's list, Ruben's top 5, and we want to hear from you about what card we did not talk about, and we'll select our favorite to win $50 worth of anything at CoolStuffInc.com. But before we go, I want to thank my co-host. Thank you, Nerd Girl.
Thanks for having me, guys. We'll see you next week.
Thank you, Ruben.
This was a fun format to do. I wonder if they'll release more Alchemy-like, Aftermath-like products in the future.
We'll see. I think we've literally passed that point of it being total feel bads into maybe this stuff's kind of interesting, and I appreciate that for what it's worth.
We get to look at the cards now.
Yeah.
We get to appreciate what the cards might do in Standard, and we'll see how Standard evolves with its recent announcement changes and whether these 50 cards are going to have any impact on the current Standard going forward. But I'm optimistic. I think that these are cool. I'm glad that they weren't in booster packs for March of the Machines. I think that the power level of the cards in this set is super high. So we'll see how it goes.
Yeah, I'm a fan, and I think again, if we could get this experience without the crazy premature spoiling and without the weird feel bads, it would be a very different experience.
I think whether we get more will 100% depend on sales.
Yep.
And honestly, we might get another one regardless of sales, just because these things are kind of coming down the pike in
Right.
such an advanced thing where it's like, okay, you know, they're already working on the second one by the time the first one's launched. So like, I think it's pretty reasonable to think that we will see more of this. It just might not be a continued theme. And also we might not see it very often because this is a wrap up to essentially what would have been sort of like a block back in the day.
Right.
You know, my actual sort of, for me, the nightmare scenario is that this did not go well and sales have not been that great. And there's a whole host of issues. And then the second one comes along and none of those issues exists. And it's a great seller. And everyone thinks it's really cool and rad and fun. But by that point, they've already canceled the third time they're going to do it because the first time, you know what I'm saying? Because they do work in the future and that could be an issue.
Yeah, I don't know if this is going to be I don't think this is an every meal kind of thing.
No, I don't think you want it to be.
This is when you're wrapping up a major story, like
once a year, once every couple years, right?
We don't always get the Guardians of the Galaxy Christmas special. We get like 5 Marvel movies a year.
Yeah.
That's what we get. So I think that getting this every once in a while is a cool idea. What else was on your top 10 that we didn't talk about, by the way, Nerd Girl? Just to, I just want to.
So, Kenris Royal Funeral.
Okay.
Nissa was on there. The Metropolis Reformer was on there. Arnie Metalbrow.
Yeah.
And then the Tranquil Fieldbrack, which we talked about. So we ended up hitting 3 of the 5.
Nice. Very good.
All right. Well, that moves us on here to our final slide. I want to thank our sponsor, CoolStuffInc.com, our co-sponsor, ManaTraders.com, my co-host, MTG Nerd Girl, and Ruben Bressler. You guys for watching and listening. I hope you support us at patreon.com/magicmics. Please follow, tweet, favorite, share, subscribe to everything social that tells people we exist. Catch us online at twitch.tv, at Magic Mics, on Twitter, at Magic Mics Cast, our Magic Mics subreddit, like the Magic Mics page on Facebook. Or join us here next week, same time, same place, for another episode of Magic Mics. Good night, everybody.